we have a crisis at our border. It is Joe Biden's making. He instituted policies using his own authority that has dismantled the border security. And this legislation would give him the money to continue doing what he's doing, which is allowing people to enter into the country. Customs and Border Protection agents are directed to release these people into the interior. They're not being detained or deported. They're being sent to cities like mine. It has become unsustainable, and it's unsafe, and it's unfair to the people that I represent who are having shelters being put in their districts and seniors being kicked out of residences to make way for migrants.
Okay.
And I'm just not going to fund this.
Well, Congresswoman, is it not then unfair to your constituents as well that a bipartisan border package that the president did agree to that would have tightened many measures at the border was not even given a vote in the House, if we're talking about what's unfair here?
It wasn't even given a vote in the Senate, and you should have the same concern about H.R. 2 that we passed out of the House that would actually secure the border. And the Senate won't give it a vote either. So it works both ways here, and I'm happy to work with the Senate to hash something out. And I was hoping that's what our Speaker would have done, is to make sure that there was some border security measures here. Because let's be clear, the president did this using his own authority. He can easily undo it. The reason we don't have a secure border right now is because he has used discretion to dismantle policies of the previous administration. The thing is, the Senate bill simply gave him some more discretion. But if he's not using the current discretion he has, what makes you think he's actually going to do something to actually solve this problem? And that is why I say, look, we need to reinstate the policies, if not of the previous administration, at least have your Secretary of Homeland Security rescind his direct to the Border Patrol agents. They're being told that if someone is convicted of a crime, that is not grounds to deport them, that on its own. That is wrong, and that is why we see these criminals coming into New York City. They're wreaking havoc, and they've assaulted police officers. We've seen stabbings. We've even seen a murder. And I'm not going to tolerate this anymore until the president decides he's going to actually work with us to really secure the border, or we just get a new president or a senator that would actually take up our legislation or negotiate with us on a package that will truly secure the border. Not what they're saying they're doing, because the Senate bill, again, is discretionary. And if the president's not using his current discretion, what makes you think he's actually going to do something when that bill passes?
Well, you've got a lot of company, Congresswoman. The Speaker failed to get a majority of the majority, which is something that a lot of people were using as an important metric on this vote. Before you joined us, we were talking about a motion to vacate now that's been filed by your colleague from Georgia, Marjorie Taylor Greene. Does Mike Johnson deserve that motion to vacate?
Look, I don't think so. I think the problem is not our Speaker. The problem is the President of the United States and the Senate Majority Leader. You got to remember, the Republicans control 1/3 of the government here. We're outnumbered 2 to 1.
The Speaker wanted this bill, though.
It's very difficult. Yeah, he did negotiate it, but the reason why I think we didn't get more of the things we wanted was because he's outnumbered 2 to 1. And the reality is, if people want to see the border being secured, they want energy production to lower costs of food and energy and utilities and inflation, then we need to have somebody who's actually going to pass our legislation over in the Senate, or a president who's willing to work with us on those objectives. The thing is, their goals are very different than ours. They want to allow millions of people to come into the country. They believe that, okay? The anti-energy policies coming out of this administration have driven utility costs in New York and elsewhere to go up significantly. American families can't afford the policies of this president, and we need to fight back. We can't do it unless we have more people either in the Senate or like I said, a president. So I would say that I'm not ready to vacate the speakership again. You remember the disaster that created last time when all of the Democrats sided with a handful of Republicans to get rid of Speaker McCarthy. And I think we had a weaker hand, by the way, in this negotiation because we lost a lot of leverage because of that. I think Kevin McCarthy would have done a better job negotiating for us. And by the way, Mike Johnson knows that the border security is our #1 issue. And to come back to this conference with this legislation and not have significant policy changes from this administration is a failure.
Well, you have had many colleagues, including Congressman Chip Roy of Texas, suggesting that this House Republican conference is a failure, as you haven't really been able to get many conservative priorities across the finish line. And it does beg the question, with all of that perhaps being true, I'm sure you have an opinion on that, the idea that not much has been able to come out of this Congress. It's worth pointing out there is an election in November. Do you think moves such as this from Marjorie Taylor Greene further threaten the House majority?
I think it's unhelpful, and as I said, it's not that we need a new speaker. We need a new president and a new Senate Majority Leader. And as for, look, Chip Roy, I would say that we have been very successful in passing the legislation that the American people want. Remember, we passed our legislation to ramp up domestic energy production that would lower costs for American families and businesses. The Senate wouldn't take it up. We passed a bill to give parents more say in their children's education and have a right to see the material of the children, what their children are being taught in schools. The Senate wouldn't take it up. We passed a border security measure that was really tough and would do the job that needs to be done. The Senate wouldn't take it up. And so you ask me about, we're not passing legislation that comes out of the Senate. They're not passing our legislation. We're the ones who have the power of the purse. Remember that. So all these fiscal policies that originate in the House, they should be taking up our legislation. I'm happy, again, not everything in that Senate bill is bad, but they didn't do the job of actually securing the border. And so we can negotiate from those starting points and come up with something solid. But really, all of this is moot if the president just did his job and used his discretion, the existing authority he has under sections 1182 and 1225 of Title 8. Again, it's all there. The laws exist. That's why we never had this crisis under any other American president, Republican or Democrat.
We're spending time with Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis here on Bloomberg TV and radio as part of our coverage today on balance of power, the Republican from New York voting against that spending package today. And as we heard from Marjorie Taylor Greene a bit earlier, Congresswoman, it appeared to be the trigger for her would be a vote on Ukraine funding. Now that this budgeting process appears to be drawing to a close, is that the next matter that will be handled? Do you want to see Speaker Mike Johnson bring a Ukraine funding bill to the floor, whether it's tied to Israel funding or as a standalone?
I want the border secured in this country. I want this unsustainable crisis to end.
We're definitely hearing you on that one.
Shelters to be closed. But what I'm saying.
So you want to have a border funding bill before you manage the matter of Ukraine?
If we can work something out where we can address both issues, I think that is the route that would most likely be taken and satisfy both parties in both houses. Because what's happening is you see Senator Schumer is so focused on Ukraine only, doesn't want to do anything on the border. House Republicans, yes, we want to support democracies and fighting against oppressors, but we want to secure our border first. So maybe there's an opportunity for us to address these issues together as a matter of a give and take. But for me to support sending more money overseas without securing our border, it is crippling this country. It is really a major problem. And I'm concerned as a New Yorker, we could potentially have a terrorist attack if we continue to have these open borders. We've catched terrorists at the border. Who knows how many are in the country already? There's been over 2 million gotaways that have evaded law enforcement, invaded government officials, and they're in this country. We don't know who they are, where they are, or what their intentions are, and that is what frightens me the most, and I'm not going to be a part of this, and that's why I voted no to fund this agency that won't do its job.